Hello and welcome back to another exciting, action-packed adventure known as the Know Your Town Show. My favorite thing about this show, it's all Saugus all the time. The show where we feature town departments, administrators, elected officials, and pretty much anything else I want to, as long as it's about Saugus. That's the only rule. Joining me today, because it is, well, I think this episode will come out in May. You know, Santa Claus has Christmas and he delivers the presents in December. In Saugus, we have Steve Doherty, and he runs our annual town meeting. Annual town meeting starts in May, so it is my great pleasure to see my good friend, the town meeting moderator.
Thank you for having me here today, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. You are the first repeat guest we've ever had on this show.
Oh, no kidding.
I think you were in probably our second episode.
Yep.
And I gave you a call a couple weeks ago, and I said, you know, May's coming up. Here's why I really called you. This is going to sound funny, but I have absolutely no idea what's on the annual town meeting warrant. Obviously, there's the general operational articles, and I have been watching the finance committee meetings over the past couple of weeks, but in terms of the extra stuff, I really have no idea what's going to happen, and I guess I don't need to know because I'm not a town meeting member. But I also think it's important that the public gets a brief rundown and, you know, about you, what the role of the moderator is. Why don't you also share with us your salary?
My salary is $0.
Because it was me, I think I know this. It was originally $1, but you gave it back out of the goodness of your heart.
Well, it wasn't a salary. I did have a budget.
You had a budget
of $1, and I think that was just a placeholder.
It was probably
from
there
years ago that they never took it out.
It was probably there just to keep the line item in the budget.
Yes.
But I remember it coming up at a finance committee meeting within the last couple weeks. Somebody, I think it might have been Ken DePato, our finance chairman, made a couple of jokes about how much they should give you. You know what I think it should be? I think it should be the town moderator's stipend should be the price of a roast beef three-way, a bag of chips, and a Pepsi from Mike's. Like $15, whatever that amount is, that's how much we should give you.
So
or like
kind of a little annual banquet.
Right. A large coffee and a donut from Cane's. That's how much we should give the moderator. So start with this, because I know we've talked about it before, but how long have you lived in this town? And you and I are neighbors on Essex Street.
Yes, right down the street. I moved up to Saugus from Everett in December of 2009.
Okay.
In 2000, and of course the election season had just passed.
Well, 2009 election season would have been what I refer to as the Peter Manoogian Charter Commission, wasn't it? Wasn't there a charter race back then?
I don't know. I wasn't here for that election race, but I ran for town meeting in 2011 and got elected. And then in 2013, Bob Long decided to retire as town moderator, so I threw my hat in the ring, and I've been in that position for 12 years now. And,
you know, I know Mr. Long very well, as you do. He's a wonderful man.
Great guy.
The thing I like about you being moderator is you're a noticeably tall guy. The voice is very low, very moving. So from the back of town hall, where I prefer to sit, because if it gets a little long-winded, you can go get a Gatorade, you know. It's nice, and, you know, your voice is nice and deep, and it projects, and for some reason, the acoustics at Town Hall, no matter what happens, are horrible.
They could be better, yeah. But
what is the role of the town meeting moderator?
The role of the moderator is just to facilitate the flow of the meeting.
Right.
I don't take a side one way or another on issues.
Politician.
My job is just to make sure that everyone who wants to speak or on either side of an issue has an opportunity to get up and do so that people can make an informed decision.
You're not the Speaker of the House. You're more like the parliamentarian.
Exactly.
You've been at it
12 years.
12 years now.
Yep.
And you know, and I don't know anything to the contrary, but I assume at the start of the next annual you'll be elected moderator again.
Again, I'll have my hat in the ring, and hopefully we'll see what
willing.
happens.
I mean, could you share with me, because I like to ask this question, you've been in Saugus a long time. Do you have any memories that stand out, both as your time as town meeting moderator and just as your time in Saugus? You know, Vinnie Serino told us stories about when he was a kid, you know, the blizzard of '76, that
Yep.
sort of thing. But what have you seen in Saugus that says, man, I like this community?
Well, before I moved up here, I have relatives that live in Saugus, so I was familiar with the community. In fact, like yourself, I was in Boy Scouts, and I remember camping up at not at Camp Nyan, but up at Breakheart.
Yep.
When we used to be able to walk, park the car and walk in.
That's right.
And set up tents up on one of the hills there. So I have some very fond memories of Saugus going back a long way.
That's fantastic. I mean, I remember camping there too. It was Camp Nyan, but as a scout, and you know, to put your roots in a community like this one is a lot of fun. And our previous guest, who I just sat with 10 minutes before you came here, Vinny Serino, said something which is, you can argue with somebody else he travels all around the world for work, and he goes, I meet people in Arizona that tell me they're from Saugus.
Yeah.
I've had arguments with people from other states from Saugus, but I'm never going to really argue with them, because you're just like, I'd rather defend that guy to somebody else who isn't from Saugus than I would to argue with him. And I said, you know, that kind of fits with the way I've seen it too. There's a sort of towny camaraderie that I like about this place, and
a shared pride.
right.
Yep.
And Vinny said it, and I agree with him. And I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Maybe I'd move away for school. You know, I'm starting a law degree in August. If I suddenly came into a ton of money and could afford the rent in Boston, I'd probably move away for a couple of years, just because it would make my commute monstrously easier.
Yeah.
But in terms of raising my family and you know, I think I'm a fourth generation Saugonian. You know, I couldn't imagine living anywhere else and starting a family anywhere else. But even over the last 10 years, 12 years, seeing a new high school and our new parks and playgrounds, and even talking about a third fire station, which isn't called a fire station anymore.
Be a public safety
building, because it'll incorporate EMS, fire, police.
Exactly.
I love seeing that sort of stuff. When Vinny was here, we talked about new enrichment programs coming to school system. And I think there's an article in Town Meeting this year about
There's actually 4 articles in this year's warrant about the budgeting for the enrichment
Well, that's
programs.
it. I like to hear the kids come to the school committee meetings and get excited about learning and doing extracurriculars and the newspaper club, and they're writing reviews for movies they saw.
Yep.
And there's always that sort of positive side of X millions of dollars in town funding, right? I like seeing where the money goes. So, you know, as the facilitator of town meeting, the arbiter, really, what have we got to look at? You know, we don't do political spin on this show. We don't do national politics. But what's coming at us in May? Anything interesting besides the regular operational
There's
budgets?
the normal stuff that you see in every year's town warrant. You know, money to fix the streets and sidewalks, the town-owned bridges and guardrails, and sewer and water infrastructure and all that, and the housekeeping things. You know, any bills hanging from a prior year, that sort of thing.
Right.
There's a total of 48 articles. There's 45.
That seems a little high.
There's 28 articles on the regular annual town warrant, and then there's 3 special town warrants within the annual that we'll be dealing with. One of those is on the trash modernization.
Yep.
Another is on the. Give me one sec here. I did make some notes before I come on because I didn't want to forget this stuff.
You noted the trash moderation. If anybody from the public wants more information on that, Saugus TV just released a special that came with us in conjunction with the manager's office on what they're actually talking about when they say that. They're looking at a new contract for a new trash company that will have, they call it automated trash pickup, but it's a robot arm that comes out and scoops up the trash, which would probably mean we'd all need new barrels, which I'm sure the town would provide. I don't know. But if you want to take a look at that special, please do. It's very informative. Maybe they can post a link to it in the description of this video, or maybe a little pip right next to my head right now. But what else have we got?
We have one of the other specials addresses it's an MBTA overlay zone.
That's right,
zoning.
MBTA zoning.
Because as you know, the MBTA has the state law. They've passed that communities served by them have to have so much in terms of multifamily housing and stuff. So
since we're an MBTA adjacent community, because we're near the Lynn Commuter Rail, Wonderland, and Oak Grove, we have to have a certain amount of is it affordable housing? There's a certain percentage.
Multifamily
housing.
Yes. And putting this overlay zone in place will help to facilitate that and put us in line with that. So that's one of the items coming up. On the annual town warrant, there's an article about marijuana establishment zoning.
Yep.
And limiting that to the number of facilities and where they can be located and that sort of thing. There's another article, I believe, about a town charter review commission and a bylaw review commission that are on there. There's another one addressing parks and playgrounds and putting together a committee to, work on how those are going to be addressed.
Right. When it comes to building another one, who has what authority and where.
I think more with the existing ones. Right. If there's going to be any change proposed to them, they want to put together a committee to examine that before it happens, get more public input, that kind of thing.
Now, Steve, I know this will be an easy question for you, but I don't know if the viewers fully get it some days, sometimes. Who can introduce an article to town meeting?
Anyone.
Anybody in town?
Anyone in town can introduce an article to town meeting. What you have to do is you have to submit it before the warrant closes to the Board of Selectmen. And
then the Board of Selectmen, I don't want to say they review it, but they have to vote to insert the article.
Yes.
So they don't sit there and scrutinize it. They don't pick it apart.
No, they don't look at it on its merit.
Yeah.
That's because that's ultimately for the town meeting members to vote whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, whether it needs to be amended, that sort of thing.
But they do have to signal, the Board of Selectmen has to signal that it's going to be in the warrant.
Exactly. Yep.
Now, every year, and this isn't always true, usually some member of the Board of Selectmen writes an article or two.
It happens.
I know Selectman Serino had done had written articles to change zoning bylaws and that sort of thing. Oftentimes, the manager will introduce articles, like the trash article. Yep. I believe that comes from the manager's office.
Correct.
The superintendent has entered, and members of the school committee have entered articles, and of course, members of the public can do it as well, and most commonly,
town meeting members. Yep.
But every one of these articles, I believe, has to go through the finance committee at a certain point.
Anything that has a financial aspect to it, if it involves appropriating funds, then yes, it needs to go to the finance committee, and they need to chime in with their recommendation on. And again, the finance committee doesn't look at whether or not it's a good idea to do this, whatever it is in the article, because that's for town meeting to decide. What they do look at is the financial feasibility of it. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes, a department will get a grant, and they'll say, well, we're going to use that grant and we're going to go out and hire 5 new employees. And right away, finance committee will say, yeah, you don't want to do that because
it's a grant.
It's
a
grant.
Out.
But when that grant runs out, now you own those people and you have to keep paying them.
Where are you going to get the money from?
Grant money is good for, we need to buy a new truck or we need to make capital improvements, but not for
one-time
personnel expenses, right? And that's kind of the way finance committee looks at things. It's like, how does this fit into the big picture, and is it feasible what they're trying to do?
I guess, without getting too much into the nuts and bolts of each article, every year you don't quite know what's going to happen. Usually, the regular operating budget stuff, usually there isn't too much there. Nothing changes relatively from year to year. Sometimes you'll see new employees or whatever, but most of that stuff has already been sort of hashed out before it gets to town.
Right. Nothing from town meeting is a rubber stamp. Any article that comes up is open for debate, and a lot of them will be debated sometimes for hours back and forth before a decision is made. But there are certain things on the warrant that are kind of standard in every year, and we know that we expect them, we know they're coming, and what the reasoning is behind them. So there will be a number of articles that will pass through, I think, pretty quickly without any debate, because they're more just housekeeping type things.
Well, it always seems to me that the special town meetings or the special warrants tend to be more fun because there's something interesting on them. Because it doesn't. So could you explain what a special town meeting is and how that is different from the annual?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of reasons for a special town meeting. Sometimes, someone may have something that They didn't get into the Board of Selectmen in time to be included on the annual town warrant, but they could still possibly get it in on a special. The other thing is that nothing that we vote on during the town meeting, during the annual town meeting, actually takes effect. None of those votes are official until town meeting closes, which could be as late as the end of June, depending on
Right.
how much business we have.
And I think the articles get sent to the Attorney General's office
Yes.
at some point too.
So with some things, the town manager, for instance, may put a project in there in a special that he wants to start, right away. He wants to get construction going,
Right.
in the month of June. So the best way to do that is to put it on a special, because typically we'll take up the special first, and once that special meeting closes, those items are voted, they're official, and you can move on and begin working on them, and while we finish out the rest of the annual warrant.
I mean, the town manager always has his projects that he's working on. I mean, we mentioned the dog park situation earlier. That came from the dog park committee. That's something that I think the town manager's office is working on at Stalker Playground, and that's brought its own issues. But even something like that kind of proposal has to go through conservation. It has to go through the Board of Selectmen, I think, at a certain point. There was a few other things. I mean, what do you enjoy, I guess, aside from working with 50 of the finest people in town on town meeting, but what is it for you that keeps coming back?
It's never boring.
Right.
Every town meeting, something new comes up. Something, as much as, like I said, a lot of it is standard year-to-year stuff. There's always something that we haven't seen before, or we haven't dealt before, or just, it might be a rehash of something we have dealt with before, but different perspectives and different angles on it sometimes. But it's never boring.
Right. I mean, and that's why I like to go to the meetings. I mean, obviously, my mother is a town meeting member. I was a town meeting member for a short time. But I also know quite a few of the town meeting members, and I like to see them. And so that's the fun part about election season, is in November, everybody's cold, standing in the rain, holding the sign. Somebody brings coffees, somebody brings donuts. There's a town meeting member who sits on the opposite side of the room than I do.
Okay.
That brings candy every single week. She's got a bag of Werther's Originals and mints and everything, and she quietly, before the meeting starts, she puts a few on every seat on her side of the room. They're also the most diverse group of people in town when it comes to jobs and age and that sort of thing. It's not like we got 50 accountants sitting in a room. It's some people are town employees.
Yep.
Some people are just concerned residents. My mother sits on the Housing Authority and on town meeting. We've had former school committee members run for town meeting. We've had teachers serving in the town of Saugus sit on town meeting. I think we probably still do. I know the head of the union for a while, Mr. Rick Lavoie, we had on this show. He was on town meeting for a while, if he isn't still. Then you get to see Ellen Shenna, our legendary town clerk, who might be maybe give or take the hardest working woman in Saugus.
Yeah, I would definitely.
Especially on election night.
In election season, absolutely, no one's working harder than Ellen.
So, speaking of election cycles, you and I get to do something very special every 2 years when town meeting and the Board of Selectmen and the school committee are up for re-election. We've done this, I think, twice before. This year will be our third, where on election night we go to town hall, and with the help of the incredible, amazing people at Saugus Television, I have to say that, otherwise they cancel the show. They ask us to host the election night coverage, and we don't get political on that show either, but we pull the votes from the different precincts with the help of a bunch of people that deliver us the messages and the photos from the tape on the wall, and that gets posted when the polls close, and we add up the numbers ourselves and report out as we go. It's one of my favorite things that I get to do.
What's nice about election season, as you alluded to, they're not partisan elections, so it's not like a presidential or a
Right.
congressional election where one side's going to win and one side's going to lose. You know, we have 50 town meeting seats, and in a given year you might have 60, 65 people running for those seats.
Right.
And everyone knows 50 of those people are going to get elected, and a few of them aren't. Try again next time. But it's not a us against you kind of battle in the election season. It's everybody's in this together.
Right.
Everybody's kind of going in the same direction to try to do the right thing. So you do have a lot of camaraderie among the candidates even. Yeah.
That's it. In Saugus, we don't really have there's no, Republicans and Democrats thing on a national stage. And I'm sure, people do have party affiliations. I know I do. I imagine you do, but I've never asked and I've never cared to know, right? Like that's the point.
Yep.
But when it comes to the town politics and the town events, there are people on the Board of Selectmen and the school committee that are Republicans, Democrats, and you wouldn't really know it because they don't advertise the fact because it's not important.
And at this level, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about Saugus for them.
Yep.
And that's what I like about it. It's always cold in November. It's always raining in October when you're holding the sign, but you also kind of want to do it. You want to be standing next to the guy at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday when you don't have anything better to do, holding an 8-foot, elect whoever sign, and you just talk and you see each other, and I just look forward to it. I look forward to seeing my friends and hearing about the town issues and, moving forward with all of that stuff.
Yep.
Some of those articles that you talked about at this year's town meeting, whether on the special or otherwise, some of them are going to pass. Some of them aren't.
Right.
Most likely. But at the same time, town meeting votes based on recommendations from the finance committee. I don't mean that they take the finance committee's advice and just do whatever they do. I mean, every article has already been approved, or should say recommended or not recommended, budget-wise, by the finance committee. So and it always gets there's always one vote or something that gets a little confusing. So it's because of the wording, it almost sounds like a double negative, but as a town meeting member, you're either voting with or against the recommendation of the finance committee. So if the finance committee votes against an article, then the town meeting members would then vote yes in the affirmative to agree with the finance committee to reject the article.
Yes. And it is confusing. And that's part of my job as the moderator, is to make sure everybody understands what it is they're voting for and what a yes vote means, what a no vote means. Because what comes before us for a vote isn't the article as it was written, it's the recommendation of the finance committee. That's what we're voting on. To either, we can take their recommendation and pass it, we can reject their recommendation, or we can amend their recommendation and change it. But their recommendation actually becomes the motion that we're voting on.
Right. And you just touched on something, and I remember I was at a school committee meeting not within the last year or so, and somebody had gotten up and spoken. And they had said a bunch of stuff. A resident, a town meeting member, I'm not going to say who it was, had gotten up and spoken, and he said a bunch of things about the town budget process and getting something he wanted pushed onto the school committee budget. And he kind of got it wrong. He misinterpreted sort of the process and the way it worked. And I said, this is going to sound a little nuts, but town meeting can do whatever it wants. The Board of Selectmen doesn't have the authority to add money or subtract money from the operating budget. Well, they do in the sense of the proposal,
right.
But town meeting can can change anything they want. If they want to build a gold statue of whoever, let's go with Wonder Woman because the creator was born here.
Yeah.
They can, even if it's not on. Even if it's not in the operating budget, they could add it in. They could add in the line item, I believe.
You're half correct there.
I am.
We can appropriate the money to build a Wonder Woman statue, but the person who can actually make the decision and say, go ahead and build the statue is the town manager.
It's town manager.
He manages the town. Oh, and that's kind of a misconception sometimes, that we're gonna tell the town manager, here's your money, and here's what you need to do.
Right.
And we can appropriate the money, but ultimately the decision on how to spend the money that's appropriated lies with the person who's responsible for managing the town, and that is the town manager.
And sometimes that can get confusing. I know, it's not a simple process.
Yep.
And I don't think it should be. But the reason I ask these questions is because I don't know everything, right? That's why we have this show. It's a lot of times it's stuff I want to know the answer to. I have no idea what's on the annual warrant this year. I'm looking forward to reading it in the next couple of days when it becomes available. But I also want the public to know that everybody in these positions are normal, everyday people with day jobs and lives, and they're not really politicians. Most of them aren't, at least.
Well, you had alluded to the Finance Committee.
Right.
And that was one of the things I was told by my predecessor, Bob, when I took over. He said that the Finance Committee, he goes, what you don't want to do, because I appoint the members as the moderator to the Finance Committee, he says you don't want to have 9 accountants sitting on there. He said, because the Finance Committee should be representative of the people they represent, the community.
Right.
We have homemakers on there. We have business owners. We have young adults who have kids in the school system. Who, everybody just like the town, everybody on the Finance Committee has their own priorities. Some of them are more concerned with, what's going on with the parks and playgrounds. Some of them are more concerned with the senior center. Some of them are more concerned, you know what I mean?
And oftentimes the members will be former, I believe one of the members of the Finance Committee was a former school committee member.
Yeah.
We've had other people that have served on half dozen boards in town. They did a couple of years here, a couple of years there. I was talking to one of our selectmen just this morning. He had been on town meeting, he was on the Board of Selectmen, he was on assessors, I think, and you'll see that is they like to be on multiple boards or one after the other, just not because they've got some big ego and it looks cool. They like doing the work. They like helping people.
And a lot of people don't realize the Finance Committee, and all of their meetings, by the way, are taped by Saugus Cable TV and to be viewed at a later date. But they start meeting with department heads in March and going through every week, every Wednesday night, they're down at Town Hall meeting with the fire chief and the police chief and the head of the DPW.
Wendy Hatch, our amazing finance director.
And the school department. And they go through the every budget line item by line item, again, just to make sure that, hey, these are questions that are going to come up. This went up, so much from last year. Why? What happened? And then they make their recommendations to town meeting. Because otherwise, honestly, that would be a long process if you had 50 people firing questions at all of these different department heads at town meeting. What's this? What's this? Those questions are kind of answered for you by the Finance Committee so that you can just take their recommendation. And again, it's not a rubber stamp. If you don't agree with it, you can move it up or down.
But it also assumes that town meeting members and the Board of Selectmen are going to take the time to watch the Finance Committee meetings. I try to.
Yep.
I don't always, I watch them, but I don't always understand them. Sometimes I have to go through them twice, and even then, I'm not quite sure what they're talking about. But I also want to learn, right? I want to get better at it, and I want the public and the people watching this at home to come down to a school committee meeting if there's something that they care about, to come and watch a Board of Selectmen meeting, in addition to trying to get help with their stop sign in front of their house or filling a pothole by the DPW or something like that. What would you say to somebody that's never been to a town meeting before? Would you encourage them to come down and watch the meeting and speak if they'd like, that sort of thing?
All of our meetings are open to the public, of course, and the same actually for the Finance Committee. Anyone can come in and attend one of those meetings.
The room is so small, nobody does though.
Well, it is, but if you have something that you feel you want to contribute that can move the town in the right direction, by all means, come on down and speak. Same thing on any warrant articles. The only prerequisite to speak at town meeting is you have to be a a voter in the town of Saugus. If you're from outside of the city, and we do sometimes have people,
lawyers or somebody representing
consultants
somebody else,
that live
right.
outside the community, and as long as everyone at town meeting agrees to let them speak, they can get up and have the microphone too.
And I don't, in my time watching those, I don't know as if I've ever seen a case where somebody was rejected flat out by town meeting.
I haven't. No, they're pretty willing to listen. They want to, again, make an informed decision. So the more information they get, the better.
I will tell this story. We may cut this one. I don't know how this will land, but there was one day in particular where somebody from the town who was now on town meeting had gotten up to speak, and he wasn't on town meeting at the time, and he spoke. He did there's a certain allotment of time speakers tend to get. I don't know what it is, 5 minutes or so.
It depends for town meeting members, town officials. There's one time frame, and for citizens, it depends on who's speaking, how much time they have.
He used his entire allotment and
Yep.
asked for an extension, and somebody, and this is very rare, somebody asked for a roll call vote. You don't ask for a roll call vote on a time extension.
No.
Well, I don't know if you know where this is going, but town meeting voted down this gentleman's time extension.
Yes.
And I was in the back of the room cracking up, and you looked stunned, and you went, all right, wrap up your sentence, I guess, and we'll, okay. And, you do see that sort of thing sometimes.
Yes.
But it also keeps it interesting, right?
And behind the desk, I'm not sitting there with a stopwatch and saying,
Right.
okay, stop, your time's up. It doesn't work like that. You have a
You're not here to
5-minute
silence anybody
time limit. I'm more like the people at the Oscars. At some point, I'm going to start playing you off. And you can tell when someone's winding up what they're saying too, and coming to their last,
Right.
making their point. And then there are times when someone gets up and just gets off course and starts rambling and going in different directions. And that's when I will kind of interrupt them and pull them back.
I mean,
get to the finish line here.
There have definitely been meetings where somebody gets up and you can kind of tell it's going to be a long one.
Yep.
So, not being an elected member, I sit in the back with the public. I get up and go to 7-Eleven, get an Arnold Palmer, and come back and
they're still talking.
They're still going.
Yep.
Like, well, great, I didn't miss much. We got to wrap up here in the next couple minutes, but I guess when we see every year new faces get involved, there are always folks that had never, oftentimes people on town meeting especially had never served public office.
Yep.
They learn how to be elected officials in that sense, and I like town meeting because it's representative. It's your neighborhood.
Yep.
In Precinct 4 where we live, I mean, we lucked out because there's some great folks in Precinct 4.
Absolutely.
But my mother and you and our friend Glenn Davis live a stone's throw from each other. We just so happen to all live within 10 houses of one another.
Yeah.
Whereas our newest colleague, look at me talking like I still work with you guys, Stephanie Shalosky lives on the other side of, near the Oakland Vale area, which was added to, used to be Precinct 9, I think. It was added to
Yep.
Precinct 4, and that's also where Bob Long came from, because he was originally Precinct 9 and he
Now
got
he's Precinct 4.
shuffled over with redistricting. But Stephanie had never worked in fact, we'll probably have her on the show at some point to talk about Saugus Action Volunteers for the Environment.
Okay.
She's very involved in SAVE. I don't think she had ever held office in town before that, but
I don't believe so, no.
but she wanted to.
Yep.
And I'm sure there are a bunch of people at home going, I don't know if I could do this. What would you say to them?
Anyone could do this. It's not a complicated process. It's just a matter of getting out there and getting your voice heard. You get nomination papers. They come out in, I believe, beginning of August from Town Hall, from the town clerk's office. You have to get 10 signatures of people from your precinct
to be a town meeting member. Yeah.
To get your name on the ballot. And it would be great. I've heard people say in the past, we should increase it, our town meeting, to 100 members or
Right.
200 members. But the problem is, if you think about it, you'd have trouble filling 100 seats because
sometimes we have trouble filling 50.
Right. We've had vacancies in the past, or we just have 5 people running for 5 seats. And other towns that have an open town meeting, any voter in town can come, and they're thrilled if they get 50 people.
An open town meeting is when you vote on articles the same way, but it's usually in a gymnasium and everybody just goes. Saugus has a representative town meeting, and I think if I'm wrong about this, the ghost of Aldonardo is going to correct me. But I think we have the smallest representative town meeting in Massachusetts.
We do. Yes, I believe
and even town meeting in itself is like it's a New England form of government. It's not even, they don't really have it in the rest of the country either.
You don't see it in other parts of the country. No, it's very much a Northeast thing.
It reminds me, and I would love it if the station could edit in a photo, but the one I'm talking about, the Norman Rockwell town meeting photo of the gentleman that, it's that old saying, you don't fight City Hall. Well, actually you do, and it's called town meeting.
Yep.
You got a problem, you come down and you talk. You got a question for Vinnie Serino on the school committee, for Deborah Panetta or Mike Serino or Anthony Cogliano on the Board of Selectmen. You get a question for Ellen Shenna or Steve Doherty. They're not hard to find. They're your neighbors, they're your friends. Nobody's too good to talk to a resident. That's what we're here for, right? Even me, a former town meeting member that has a show like this to hear himself talk. I'm happy to help anybody I can find that needs it. I've been on the rail trail and people have stopped me and said, "You're Andrew, right?" Yes. And they'll ask me a question about the DPW. Now, you know this. It's going to sound stupid, but I don't work for the DPW.
Yep.
But I will call the right person. Let me take your number down. Let me try and give you a hand here. At this station, I'll plug the email address now, info@saugustv.org. If there's somebody you want to see featured on this show, if there's something that I can do to make this town more, make you understand the process more, whether it's you or Vinny or somebody else, then I want to talk to them. And we're running out of time here.
Yep. So
I will have to let you go. Steve, I look forward to seeing you in November. I look forward to your $1 budget item and our election night broadcast every year.
It's going to be a fun election season. I'm looking forward to it all.
Well, that's it. And even, you and I will say this on the broadcast, and I'll say it now, we usually know who we voted for.
Right.
But we're not going to advertise it because it's not about us. It's not about who we want to win. And I'm always proud of who won. I'll never forget the year that I ran for town meeting. I had filled the seat of Aldonardo, who moved to Plymouth. And I think I lost by 2 votes, 1 vote or so. It was very close. And we were in the middle of the broadcast, and you passed me your phone. I think it must have been Glenn Davis had texted you the results. So you gave me a second to digest the answers. And, would I like to win that seat? Sure. But it's not going to change any of the things I'm doing.
Right.
Right? I'm still going to go to every town meeting I can. I'm still going to help any resident I can. I'm still going to do the broadcast, and I'm still going to try and do my best for the community that everybody loves. And I guess on that note, back to the studio. I've turned into Top Gear. On that bombshell, thank you for watching. As I said a few minutes ago, info@saugustv.org. If there's anything you think we should feature on this show, please let me know. We've got a lot of big stuff coming up. A lot of guests that I'm going to film throughout the summer. You guys will probably see these episodes throughout the year. Steve, my friend, Mr. Moderator, good to see you. Thanks for watching. Thank you to everybody at SCTV and in our control room for putting up with me. And we'll see you next time on Know Your Town.
And thank you.
Thank you.